Welcome to the Power Lunch on LinkedIn Live, LinkedIn's new platform for live video and live interviews. Now, we simulcast this program on not only on LinkedIn, but on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch, I think, and probably something else I'm forgetting. So it's everywhere. So if you want to watch it on your favorite platform, it's out there for you to do so. Now, the fun part about the show is that it's interactive. So sometimes we get to the questions, sometimes we're not able to because we just got so much information going on. But nonetheless, if you do ask questions, we can certainly get to them on social media. And I know Sarah and I will both be engaged with that process if you ask questions. And that's the only way to learn and get the information that you want to get. Now, that's the whole point of the show is we actually have today's business leaders, thought leaders, best-selling authors, CEOs, those kinds of people who are doing really amazing work in the world. So that we have them on the program so that we can learn from them. That's the whole reason why they are here, and that's why hopefully you're here. So anyway, without further ado, let me introduce Sarah Fruy, right? Fruy.
Fruy, like rhymes with Louis.
Right. She's a director of online marketing at Pantheon, which is a leader in website hosting, building, and marketing. And Sarah, thanks so much. You're an expert in digital marketing, and so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, because I think it's this topic that is so confusing to business owners and business people that and I think it's very easy to get burned by a so-called expert if you bring somebody on. So I want to talk about that a little bit today. But there's just so much to learn, and if you're not a specialist in this, if you don't have the background you have, it's a really hard thing to get your head around. Tell me what your thoughts are. Where should a small, medium enterprise or even a startup focus in terms of building a digital marketing? I guess probably a plan to begin with. I think that's something most people don't have is a plan.
Yep. One of the areas I usually start with at the very beginning of a new project is competitive research. So trying to figure out who in the market am I being compared against? What are they doing? What do I think is working in that regard? How could I differentiate myself? If like we did a website relaunch project a little over almost 2 years ago now, and there was a website that we really loved, and I'm like, but it can't look anything like that because I don't want anyone thinking that we're ripping them off. But like I was able to pull out themes and things like that I appreciated from their concepts. And then also I think having a really clear understanding, as much as you can if you're at a startup or at a more evolved business, but who are your personas? Like who are you trying to reach? What are they trying to get out of you? And how can you really serve your customer or your audience the best? And getting as much information on them as possible is just going to make your campaign and your program stronger.
So what are the basics? So I've got a company, and I know, aside from I know I have to have a website, and I know I probably have to have, I think I need to have a Facebook page, and I think I need to have a Twitter account, and I think I probably need to have LinkedIn. Is that the right way to think about it, or is it, what do I need? What do I really need? And what should I really focus on first?
I think starting with a good website is sort of the heart of everything, because if you do end up going on things like Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, generally speaking, you're going to be pointing back to that digital property. And so you really want to have that owned real estate be something that you can be proud of and feel like very confident in the messaging and the experience for your audience. Because when you get into these other social platforms and channels, like you tend to start to lose control. Like you're fitting formats and templates and ways of communicating that someone else is dictating, where on your website, like that's property that you get to do whatever you want and you get to really like guide that user. And so to me, like that's the most valuable thing. And then don't feel pressured to be on one platform over the other. Again, I think this goes into that persona research. Like some audiences skew young and they might be on Snapchat. For our company, like that's not a place that we need to be. And so we're not investing in there, but we do get a lot of great feedback on things like Twitter in terms of like having conversations, and on LinkedIn in terms of sharing information. And so we sort of look at where our audience is and try and have a presence there. Like another area that we look at is places like Reddit and Quora. Like people are asking a lot of questions in the digital space. And so we get a ton of referral traffic from those platforms. And so it really goes into like doing your research. Once you have that website, you can look at Google Analytics and start to see like where are people coming from, and that can help you map out like where do you want to make your next investment in terms of like extending your brand.
So I'm a an executive coach, a business coach, and if I hear this one more time, I don't know what I'm gonna do. My head might explode. But every business owner I talk to that I coach, comes to me and says, well, Rhett, you write at Forbes and you write at Inc. and you have a platform and you do all this stuff and you're doing a lot of self-promotion or a lot of content development. Don't we need to start doing content development? And don't we need to be out there, building our personal brand? Don't we need to be out there writing a bunch of content? Do you think that is a smart thing, or is it sometimes distracting from what you really should be focused on? Because I think everybody says, content, right?
Right. I think it's, again, like, are you serving your audience? Is it good content? Are you providing thought leadership? Are you bringing some new ideas to the table? If you're just going out there and kind of repeating things that you're hearing from other people, but you're not providing a unique perspective on it, then that's not going to add value, and people are going to see through you pretty quickly. But if you do have like a really great campaign, you're trying to like shift the market and get people to think differently, like that's where that content can be really powerful. But good content or bad content, you can either win people over or you can lose them. So don't feel like that is like a requirement if you don't have a strong point of view on how you're going to leverage that experience.
So when a company's thinking about this sort of strategy, and they're looking at hiring or bringing on somebody to help, is it better sort of to have an outside perspective or bring somebody in kind of full time to work on this stuff? I know it depends on the size of the company, but in general, how do you think about that as a small, medium-sized enterprise maybe that is really just now ramping up here in this area and really paying a lot more attention to it because it has potential to grow revenue and to grow sales, and to reach an audience? How do you look at it? Would you, if you were a business owner, would you bring somebody in-house, or would you hire somebody from the outside to sort of help you?
Well, I'm an agile practitioner, so I'm a big fan of testing things before I go all in. And so in this situation, I would go with an agile approach of bring on a contractor, test them out, see what kind of feedback you're getting from the market. Is this like increasing traffic to your site? Are you growing your social audience? Like, what goals are you trying to achieve with this content? And are you mapping to that? And if you see success, then have them write some more content for you. If you continue to see success, iterate on that. If you don't, try a different writer. But I would start to do small things that are measurable to begin before saying like, hey, I'm gonna create full-time headcount, I'm gonna hire somebody, and then it sort of blows up in your face and now you're dealing with like an HR issue where you have to let somebody go that you didn't even realize that you didn't need because it wasn't the right strategy for you at that time. So for my company in particular, we tend to leverage a lot of contractors to sort of like test our ideas, and then sometimes they become contract to hire, or we'll bring someone on that just levels up that role. But we do like to experiment first before like fully committing to new strategies.
When you think about it all, so would you use a contractor, say, for content development, and then maybe a contractor for paid and inbound? Or, I mean, how would you sort of divvy it? If you thought about it, sort of all the areas that you have to pay attention to, would you bring somebody on for the different areas? And how would you break those areas up?
Yeah, I think that when it comes to creative writing, there are people that are really strong at like long form content, like blog posts, ebooks, white papers, that kind of thing. And then there's people that are really great at very succinct copy, so the things that you would want in an ad. And occasionally you can find somebody who can do both, but more often than not, you're going to find people with different strengths and weaknesses. And particularly when it comes to like digital advertising, you want somebody that like knows how to like leverage that space. Again, like when you think about the different channels that you're talking to, we as marketers need to like tweak our messaging to fit those different platforms. Like the ads that we put on Facebook are not necessarily appropriate for like a LinkedIn audience, which is much more professional, or a Twitter audience that's much more conversational. And so how you communicate within those different channels has to change, and you need someone that understands that nuance versus someone who might be writing for your blog, or even I would say like a different person could be like landing pages on your website. Like doing product marketing can be different than like thought leadership. And so again, having like a good strategy of like, what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve with this different type of content? Then I would start out with really like specialized people, and then figure out like long-term, if you do get headcount, can you hire someone that's more of a generalist that you can sort of like train in these different areas, or that has more broader experience. But if you can leverage contractors, I tend to focus on really specialized people, because like that's just going to get me to done faster and to where I want to go, you know, in a quicker path.
No, absolutely. And it seems like it might be cheaper in the long run.
Yeah.
Because it's not like you're doing ad copy all the time, right? You might be doing ad copy once a month or something.
Right. Or you might have like a particular project, like let's say you have a form on your website and you want to create like an email nurture campaign. And so sending out a series of like automated emails to get people to engage with you, or set a meeting, or buy a product, or whatever that goal is. Like you could have somebody that just like knows how to do nurture campaigns, and like that's their specialty, and they complete that project for you. And then you can like let them go, so you don't have that extra overhead if you're trying to, you know, grow quickly as a company and not spend in areas that are excessive.
Right. And so I guess the same would go, you know, for your paid social too, because that's a real special niche, I think.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you think about things like SEM. Yeah, like you could have somebody that like their whole job is just AdWords. Like that's a whole can of worms in and of itself.
How would you, for any of these positions, where would you go to hire? Where would you look for this type of person?
I would say if you're trying to move really quickly, I tend to lean on recruitment firms. You know, I have like folks that I like to call up, and I know I'm going to get good talent. Also, I would say even before that, I look at my own network. I think that like it's really important to have like a roster of people that you've worked with in the past that you can trust. If you don't have that sort of like Rolodex, so to speak, you know, reach out to people in your community that you trust. Like, hey, I know that you just made a bunch of new content on your website. Love what you're doing. Would you recommend a writer for this project? Or do you have like an agency that you contracted for that? And start to get like personal referrals, because I do think like looking within your network is you're going to get the best talent pool. And then you run that risk when you have an unknown quantity coming in to work with you. So that would be like my first step, is really looking at my social network and tapping that first.
Are there recruitment firms that specialize in this sort of area in digital marketing?
Yeah, there's staffing agencies like Robert Half or Creative Circle. There's a number of different companies. Some, if you're at a bigger organization, you might have internal recruiters that you could tap and have them pull you in. Like as my company's gotten bigger, that's a new resource that we have available. I've had it at other organizations as well. So it just kind of depends on like what the structure you have set up at your particular business. There's also things like Upwork. That's like cheaper labor. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're kind of like all over the world. And so you're not necessarily like, I live in the Bay Area. It's very expensive here. For us to staff locally can be a big expense. And so sometimes we look at like, okay, maybe there's somebody in another country or another part of the United States where they're really talented, but they work from home, and we can do this like remotely.
Has that been successful for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I would say like when I first joined Pantheon, most of our team was in-house in San Francisco, and now we're almost like 50-50 with remote workers versus people at headquarters. And I think a lot of businesses are scaling that way. I've worked with a few agencies, and my agency partners are entirely remote. So we do everything like over Zoom or different like chat, like Slack and things like that. And it gives people a lot of flexibility. Like you don't need to be in those urban centers now to have a great job. The internet has really like opened up a new workforce for a lot of different people who might not want to live in that environment.
Actually, it seems like too, from you know, everybody in my network, it seems like a lot of these sort of remote workers don't want to come and work somewhere full time, right? They actually like working on a specific project and then moving on. So I think that I think that's really interesting. Talk about a little bit about your you sort of had this, you wrote this article on LinkedIn about the lean, you know, getting certified in agile mindset, and the way that changed the way you kind of looked at project management. Can you talk about that a little bit? I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, so as a marketer, we kind of look at project management from like two major buckets. So like a waterfall approach where you have a big campaign that you're working towards. You maybe spend like a few weeks or a few months trying to hit this big target, and everything is sort of like done sequentially. And then there's an alternate school of thought of agile, where you take that big project and you break it down into smaller tasks. Again, like that MVP or minimum viable product. Like, what can we get done this week as a proof of concept to validate that we're heading in the right direction? And then that is measurable. So I can like look at results to say like, okay, this is effective because we're getting a higher click-through rate, or you know, we're getting more email opens, or whatever that metric is that we're trying to measure success by. And then you can start to like dig into that. And like what you might find out through the agile process is that North Star, this big goal that you were searching, is actually not what you thought it was. Like your audience is shifting in a different way. And so in order to really like drive that engagement, you need to pivot your strategy. And with a waterfall approach, it's really hard to figure that out until you've launched. You're like, oh, wow, this worked or it didn't. With agile, you get these like quicker signals to let you know sooner. And so as a manager, like for me, I feel like I'm making much stronger decisions now. I'm making much more data-driven choices. Like if you can't give me like business value, if you can't show me results, then like I can't sign off on this. And so I really try and focus on things that are measurable. And then also with agile, like we work in sprints. So like 2-week segments, for example, where we're going to commit to a certain body of work. And what that helps me do with like other business units is if they come to me and they want to throw something on my plate at the last minute, it's like, all right, well, this sprint we've committed to X, Y, and Z projects. Do you think that this is more important? Then we're going to need to like deprioritize something that we've already committed to. And so rather than like burning out my team saying like, oh, we just got more work, you know, you have to work this weekend or this evening, it's just kind of like, okay, this is no longer our top priority. We're shifting gears, and you can kind of like adapt to that. And so it really helps me be a better people manager, because I'm not trying to like drive people to the ground, but I can be much more flexible when priorities shift and be responsive in that manner.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's a great way to manage it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think just from a result standpoint and knowing where you are. And when I read your thing about, you know, it ruins a quarter when you get to the launch and you find out it doesn't work. And I've experienced that way too many times. One of the things I thought was interesting is you've done a lot of work in terms of monetizing websites. What's what do we think about, or how do we look at our websites, and how is it? How should you look at it in terms of monetization? How can you monetize your website? I mean, I know that's not applicable to every business, but is there some key things questions you have to ask, things that you have to do?
I would say in terms of like, if you're trying to leverage advertising dollars to generate revenue from your website, like I've worked at a lot of ad networks in the past. So from that perspective, it's not like a set it and forget it approach of like you get your ads in place and you're seeing like good click behavior or follow through on that. But people start, like banner blindness is a very real thing. You need to start like shifting how you're doing messaging, and like that's where I think that like native advertising can be really interesting. Of like, if you know someone's within the experience, creating an ad that is like clear that this is promotional content, but it feels really relevant to the content around it, so that you're rewarding your audience versus like annoying them. I think that can be a really effective monetization strategy, because if you have a bunch of stuff that's just like noise, you're going to turn people off, and you might actually like lose visitors to your website. So you need to think of advertising as like more of like a partnership these days of like, what can I do with advertisers or with my content so it feels more native to the experience that I'm trying to create and I'm not upsetting anybody. And then I think it's also just being really creative and like thinking outside of the box about like new ways to bring that revenue to your website. Like one page that I'm constantly testing on Pantheon site is our pricing page. Like it's never something that I feel like is done. There's always ways that I can be optimizing this, whether it be like through the look and feel, how we're communicating, prioritizing information. But like, if you have a page that you're trying to make money on, or a section of your website, you should always be trying to optimize that and look at consumer behavior, because like even those tests have an expiration date, right? Like there's a diminishing return on value for the decisions that you make. Eventually people will